Finally, the moment we've been waiting for. The 5 top heavy metal albums of 1981. We're going to talk about them, and we're going to take an in-depth look at 2 of the greatest Ozzy Osbourne albums of all time. Next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. Tonight, we're going to unveil 5 of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time as they compete to be named the 1981 Album of the Year. But before we get to that, we've been kind of doing a running theme in 1981. I made the observation that 1981 and 1980 are kind of twin years in that many bands produced 2 albums in these 2 years that are very similar and stand alone as unique segments of their catalog. We talked about the Dio years with Black Sabbath, for instance, the Paul Di'Anno years with Iron Maiden. And unfortunately today we have to talk about the Randy Rhoads era of Ozzy Osbourne. Unfortunately, there's no getting around it. This is the last album we're going to see with Randy Rhoads. We got 2 unbelievable albums before that arc was cut short in a tragic plane accident. But tonight we're going to take a look at those 2 Randy Rhoads fueled albums, Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, and declare once and for all which one of these albums stands alone at the top of the Ozzy Osbourne catalog. No offense to any of the other Ozzy albums that came after, these are his 2 absolute best, and a lot of the reason being, the immortal Randy Rhoads. But this is not just about me giving my opinion. So if you have an opinion, if you have a strong inkling of what you think is the best Ozzy Osbourne album, especially between these 2, but okay, you can even pick another album if you so choose. But I'm going to give you my selection, and then you go into the comments and you put your selection in. I'll tell you, so far the voting has been very interesting. Lots of disagreement on my selection for the best Iron Maiden, and mostly agreement on my selection for Black Sabbath. So we've agreed on one, we've disagreed on one. Tonight's the rubber match. Let's see if we agree or disagree on the best Ozzy Osbourne album. Let's get started. Both of these albums start off with ridiculously good tracks. I'm a sucker for a good album opener, one that really kicks it into gear right off the bat. Both these albums deliver. On the Blizzard of Oz, you have the amazing I Don't Know. I love the sound effects that kick that baby off, and it is a banger. But it's also going up against Over the Mountain, which if you watched last week's episode, you know I'm also partial to. Randy Rhoads' thundering opening riffs on Over the Mountain are all-timers. Over the Mountain's going to take the opening contest here pretty handily. I love I Don't Know. It's a great song, so there's no knockouts here. But Over the Mountain is one of the strongest songs in the Ozzy Randy collection. Again, that thundering opening riff, what a way to start the album off. Our first winner, Over the Mountain, 8-2. Our second competition, the trademark song from Ozzy, Crazy Train, going up against Flying High Again. Now listen, I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking about this one. Crazy Train has to win this one. It is one of the most legendary, best-known songs of all time. But once again, very similar to the first contest, Flying High Again puts up a scrap, though. This is not a knockout by any means. I think you have to go with the signature song, and I think Crazy Train is the better song. I think Randy Rhoads' solo in that's better. But I'm going to give Flying High a couple points. So just like the first bout, we're going to judge this one. Crazy Train, 8. Flying High Again, 2. in each of these little album contests we've had, it's eerie how similar the albums are. But this one takes the cake, I think. Our first song, we have two really rambunctious openers. Second is more, the second track on both albums is kind of the hit song, if you will, off those albums. And then we come to the third song, and both these albums put out a ballad. On Blizzard of Oz, we have the emotional story of Ozzy's isolation in Goodbye to Romance. And on Diary of a Madman, we have You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. I think that at the end of the day, both are very good, albeit a little slower songs. But my love affair for Goodbye to Romance is legendary. I love that song. And the reason I love it, go back to any of my Ozzy videos, and I'll talk about the fact this is such an emotional, this is Ozzy really opening up to the fans. This is him telling us where he's at as a human being. Keep in mind, when this song comes out, he's just been dumped by Black Sabbath. He's having some marital problems. He feels isolated and all alone. And so he pens this song, Goodbye to Romance, Goodbye to Friends. But then there's this little bit of an optimistic, maybe we'll meet in the end. And of course, he meets the love of his life in Sharon Osbourne, and eventually patches things up and reunites with Sabbath for a few different projects down the road. So Goodbye to Romance, one of the best, if you know the backstory of a song type of thing, one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs you'll ever hear. So it has to win. But just barely. 6-4. Our fourth battle might be a little bit of a handicap match, because from the Blizzard, we're going to put D and Suicide Solution up against, from Diary of a Madman, Believer. Just the fact that I put a guitar solo in with the song on the Blizzard probably gives you an indication of who's going to win this one. Believer's a really good song, though. I think it really, both of these songs really finish the album very strongly, or finish the side of the album very strongly. But once again, D is a beautiful kind of acoustic guitar solo. I love it to death. One of the little tidbits that Randy Rhoads leaves behind for us. And Suicide Solution is such a great song because it really is the theme of Ozzy's whole life as he's battling substance use and drug addiction. Once again, I got to go with the Blizzard, who's on a roll. That's 3 in a row for the Blizzard. And they take this one again, 6-4. Diary of a Madman's in trouble, because now they're going up against a legend. My favorite Ozzy Osbourne song of all time, Mr. Crowley, versus, from Diary of a Madman, Little Dolls. Doesn't matter. Little Dolls is a good song, but Mr. Crowley is legendary. And so Blizzard's going to score their first knockout of the event. They're going to take this all 10 points. I've said it before. If you want to know what was the deal with Randy Rhoads, give me a guitar solo that you think I'll like. I'm going to point you right here to this one. I love the story. The backstory of this is Ozzy's put together this very dirgy, dark song. And he says to Randy Rhoads, like, good luck making a guitar solo on this song. And Randy's like, hold my beer, and here we go. And writes one of the best guitar solos you're ever going to hear. Mr. Crowley, like I said, it's the absolute best song in the Ozzy collection. I'll fight over that one any day. But anyway, 10-zip. And right now, Blizzard of Oz is pulling away. As if that mirror imagery couldn't get any more in focus, both Blizzard and Diary produce, in my opinion, the two weakest tracks on the album to go head to head. From Blizzard of Oz, the awful No Bone Movies, and from Diary, the ballad, Tonight. Now you can probably tell just by my lead in that No Bone Movies is not going to win this thing. The Blizzard of Oz, we talk about perfect albums. We talk about Hall of Fame. Blizzard is near perfection. And then they stick No Bone Movies in there. I'm like, can you, like, it doesn't fit with the album. It's terrible. It is funny, though. I have to say, when I put out my Ozzy tribute to this album, I did mention that No Bone Movies was so terrible. And someone wrote me and said, I love No Bone Movies. It's a great song. So, to each and everybody's taste, I suppose, but it is terrible. But tonight's not really one of my favorite tracks either. It's a pretty little ballad. And I think Ozzy gets a little bit of a bad rap. I think he writes ballads really well. They're just not my, I just don't think on this album with so many good songs, this one just isn't. It's going to come in 10th place. So in the battle of the two weakest songs on the album, I'm going to give it to Tonight 8-2. From the weakest songs to two of the strongest, I really love these two songs. From Blizzard of Oz, we have Revelation Mother Earth. And from Diary of a Madman, you have SATO. Now, I think that if there's one thing that really makes Blizzard stand apart from Diary, is I love the keyboards of Don Airey. And he has an unbelievable piano interlude in Revelation Mother Earth that is just amazing. And it kind of sets that tone for then when Randy Rhoads kicks in with the guitar, it really shifts powerfully. SATO is very good. It has one of my favorite Randy Rhoads guitar solos of all time. And it's the perfect segue into the final song on the album. So both of these songs are probably my favorite deep cuts on each of those albums separately. So it's close. But I have to give it to Revelation Mother Earth 6-4. But I am going to give one bonus point, as I often do, to SATO. Because again, the interlude between SATO and the final track, Diary of a Madman, is so brilliantly done. I have to give it a little extra point there. A squeaker, but the Blizzard takes it 6-5. At this point, Diary of a Madman is in big trouble if it's going to catch Blizzard of Oz. It's pretty much going to have a knockout in the final song. But luckily for Diary of a Madman, it has an unbelievable finishing track. One of my favorite finishing tracks of all time. The title track, Diary of a Madman. Starting out with this beautiful acoustical, eerie kind of beginning. It brings up into a crescendo, really great guitar solo, and then kind of a haunting, almost chorus-like ending. If there was ever a song that could bring it all the way back, this would be it. But unfortunately, it also runs up against a pretty strong song off Blizzard. Steal Away the Night is a really good way to end an album. It's not going to win any Hall of Fame awards or anything, but it's a nice fast track that really highlights Ozzy and Randy. So I can't give Diary of a Madman, as good as it is, I'm not going to give it a knockout. Once again, I'm going to give it the win 8-2. But that's not going to be enough. The winner, and it's very close, goes to Blizzard of Oz. 42-39. Now let's talk about the top 5 albums of 1981, and maybe Diary of a Madman might make the cut. Our first nominee, Black Sabbath, with Mob Rules. These are the defending champions. They won the 1980 heavy metal album with Heaven and Hell, and as the defending champs, they come back with an absolute classic. We've talked about this album so much. Falling Off the Edge of the World, one of my favorite songs of Black Sabbath of all time. The majesty of Sign of the Southern Cross, the intensity, the fast pace of the title track Mob Rules, the eclectic cult classic Country Girl. This album has it all. If you are a fan of Ronnie James Dio, if you are a fan of Black Sabbath, you know this is one of the all-timers. Our first nominee, Mob Rules by Black Sabbath. Our second nominee is also an album we've talked about in the past, Killers by Iron Maiden. I think Killers is probably my favorite as far as just pure bass, drums, guitars, singing, the whole works. This thing is an absolute tour de force. The Paul Di'Anno era really goes off with a bang. This is one of those albums that just has everything to it. It starts off, of course, with the classic Ides of March breaking into Wrathchild, and it just keeps going from there. Banger after banger after banger. I'll admit, the Bruce Dickinson era is going to put together some of the best Iron Maiden albums of all time. But don't sleep on the Paul Di'Anno era. I talk about it all the time. This is a very underrated era of Iron Maiden music. This album, Killers, is an essential for any heavy metal collection. It is our second nominee, Killers by Iron Maiden. Now, if you've ever watched the Grammys, the one thing I will say about the Grammys, it's a little bit different than a lot of lists you'll see out there, is most people, when they start talking about albums of the year, they're only talking about studio albums. And for the most part, I agree with that. But every once in a while, a live album comes around that's just too good to ignore. And the Grammys include live albums, and so do I. Our third nominee, Motorhead, with No Sleep Till Hammersmith. This is one of the best live albums of all time. I'm going to do a little, I almost did our artist spotlight this week on this great album. Motorhead, No Sleep at Hammersmith. If you've never heard the older Motorhead stuff, this is kind of the capper for the Filthy Phil, Fast Eddie Clark era of Motorhead. I'm going to do a special in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to shine the spotlight on this one because it is, I think, the last great live album heavy metal puts out for some time. So we're going to talk more about this one in a couple episodes. So if you're a big Motorhead fan, hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss it because you want to hear all about this great album. Our third nominee, Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Our fourth album, you knew it was going to be here. It is our spotlight album, Diary of a Madman, the last album with Randy Rhoads in the guitar slot. From the opening tracks of Over the Mountain to that unbelievable crescendo finish of Diary of a Madman, this album absolutely smokes from start to finish. One of the all-time greats. Our fourth nominee, Ozzy Osbourne and the late Randy Rhoads with Diary of a Madman. And our fifth and final nominee, we talked about just last week, Riot, Fire Down Under. I've talked about this album a lot. 4 of the best songs you're ever going to hear. Swords and Tequila, the title track, Outlaw, Altar of the King. If you've never heard this album, you are doing yourself a disservice. Go out and listen to it. It is an all-timer. And the winner is If You Listen to Fools, The Mob Rules. The defending champs bring home their second album of the year in a row. Congratulations to Black Sabbath. This is my favorite era of Black Sabbath. These 2 albums stand alone as 2 of the best albums of all time. I love this album. We've talked about it enough. It's bringing home the gold. Congratulations to Black Sabbath. We'll see next year. They're going to go for 3 in a row. No artist has even come close to pulling off the trifecta. We'll see if Black Sabbath can do it in 1982. The Grammys. That year, they went with the album Double Fantasy, which was John Lennon and Yoko Ono. You know my take on the Beatles. It's pretty much the same for a lot of the solo stuff that they did afterwards. I liked a few John Lennon songs. I liked a few Paul McCartney songs. But I've always found the Beatles a little bit mid. I know that's heresy in the rock world, but I just don't think that they're that good. Now, this is obviously following the tragedy of John Lennon being murdered just a few months earlier than this. I think this was kind of, there was sometimes, when tragedy like this hits, sometimes, the awards go pouring in because everybody knows, oh my goodness, this is the last time we're going to be able to honor this person. So I get the sympathy vote here. This is kind of almost like a lifetime achievement award, right? Because we've lost him tragically, but I really do believe you just have to go with the best album of the year. And in my opinion, it is not Double Fantasy. It is Mob Rules by Black Sabbath. So not only is Mob Rules going to take home the heavy metal album of the year, they're going to win album of the year as well. Congratulations again to Black Sabbath. We'll see if they can pull off the trifecta next week. Speaking of next week, we are going to be doing our special Halloween edition. A few months ago, I fell in love with the band Ghost. I went to go see a movie about Ghost and came away. True confession, I was determined that I did not like Ghost. I was not going to go for that. Went to the theater, saw the movie, and I can't believe it. I fell in love with Ghost. So I put a little movie review out on the channel. Lots of Ghost fans came in, and I said, listen, this outpouring of love from you Ghost fans for this new convert, what do you want? I'll do a follow-up. So I thought, how appropriate for Halloween. I'm going to talk about the top 10 Ghost songs of all time. So get your trick-or-treat pails ready. Come by next week. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. Halloween's a busy time of year, everybody. Lots of parties to go to. You don't want to miss the top 10 Ghost songs of all time. Until then, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.